Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Real brief. My name's Joel, one of the curators here, and what we're going to do here for you this morning is just slow you down, for about 10 minutes and give your eyes a rest, explain a little bit more in detail what's been going on behind the scenes in Jerusalem for the last 55 years, as what we know today as the greatest archaeological discovery of all time has been put back together again, piece by piece by piece. Now, when we say that term, the Dead Sea Scrolls, that's not the most accurate term that describes this great find. Very few scrolls were actually found. In fact, there was only one complete Old Testament scroll found in the caves of Qumran, this being the famous Isaiah scroll, which is on display today at the Shrine of the Book Museum in Jerusalem. Most everything else came in 19,000 pieces, similar to the size and scope that you see here on these black walls in front of you. Now, these 19,000 pieces have been reassembled into 800 unique scrolls. Now, 600 of those 800 scrolls were non-biblical scrolls. The other 200 were Old Testament biblical scrolls. Common misconception concerning this great discovery was that the Dead Sea Scrolls were Scripture alone. This is, in fact, not the case. Just about 25% of the total discovery was Scripture. But for you to have 200 Old Testament scrolls, remember there's only 39 books in the Old Testament, must have meant there were duplicates. This is in fact the case. For instance, 36 unique copies of Psalms were found in the caves of Qumran, 21 unique copies of Isaiah, 30 unique copies of Deuteronomy. Now, the scribes that occupied this area on the northwestern corner of the Dead Sea for a period of about 250 years, well, they obviously had their favorites. This will become important a little bit later on in the lecture, so hold that thought in the back of your minds. Now, 12,000 of the 19,000 pieces uncovered at Qumran all shared one very similar problem. If you've been by these black walls, you've already identified what the problem was, in that it was very difficult, if not downright impossible, for the scholarship of Jerusalem to read or identify any of the handwriting on top of the sheep and the goat skin. The cause of this is nothing more than 2,000 years of exposure to the elements. Leave anything out there for that amount of time, you'll obviously have a severe amount of decay. The Dead Sea Scrolls were not exempt from this particular problem. Now, had it not been for this little bit of technology that I have here in my right hand, commonly referred to as infrared, scholarship even today would be significantly handicapped in the reconstruction project. For what this little bit of technology allowed the scholarship in Jerusalem the ability to do was, for the first time, read that handwriting, again, never before seen in 2,000 years. And here in just a few moments, we'll tiptoe down a few of these black walls, show you how first things look to the naked eye, then how things look under infrared. We'll also cover a little bit more of the geography and history in and around this region, finally ending with the tragedy at Masada, right around 73 A.D. Now, down here on panel number 1, you'll find the Exodus fragment. Switching the camera over to full color mode, what we're going to do is just show you again how this piece looks first to the naked eye. And as you can see here now, very difficult to see anything. But when we switch over to infrared, watch the stark contrast. Now, what you're looking at there is, in fact, the oldest form of Scripture ever uncovered by archaeologists, uncovered on the northwestern corner of the Dead Sea, which you'll find 20 miles due east of the city of Jerusalem. Now, sheepskin here is the surface, a carbon-based vegetable ink applied to it. Now, the piece you're looking at here now dates back to 150 B.C., which makes it 2,155 years old. Now, the bulk of this discovery was made between December of 1947 and June of 56. Remember who gets all the credit? That famous little 12-year-old boy named Muhammad al-Adib. He's out goat shepherding one afternoon. He loses track of one of his goats, thinks the goat may have wandered off into a cave. So he picks up a rock, throws it into the cave, hoping to scare the goat out. Well, he doesn't hit his goat, but what he does hit is some pottery. Hearing the shattering of it, he goes to investigate. And again, a 12-year-old gets credit for the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. Also remember, every book of the Old Testament was found in the caves of Qumran, except for one. The only Old Testament book missing was that all-important book of Esther, which ironically enough, as many of you already know, happens to be the only book in the entire Bible that has the distinction of neither one referencing or two mentioning the name God one time anywhere in it, or Jehovah, Elohim, Yahweh, any other Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, English word you want to use for God. You'll never find his name mentioned in the book of Esther. Don't go looking for it. I promise you it's not there. But again, it is pretty interesting that the one book of the Old Testament not found in the caves of Qumran happens to be the very same book that fails to mention God's name. Now, math books, science books, astronomy books, books on how to practice proper hygiene, books on how to cook your food, books of the Apocrypha were also found in the caves of Qumran. Now, here on panel number 2, you'll find our Psalms fragment, and you can see again how clear that text shows up to the naked eye infrared. Now, there were 4 unique writing surfaces uncovered at Qumran. Animal skin made up the bulk of this discovery. About 95% of the Dead Sea Scrolls were either sheepskin or goat skin. The other 3 writing surfaces were copper, linen, and papyrus. Now, there were 4 unique languages found within the Dead Sea Scrolls. Hebrew and Aramaic was the bulk of this discovery. There was also a bit of Greek, as well as the ancient Hebrew. But 4 writing surfaces, 4 unique languages. Again, from the book of Psalms. Now, let's cover a little bit more of the geography and history in and around this region. Some of you now do a little right-hand turn. You're looking out of cave number 11 that we've recreated here for demonstration purposes. Now, cave 11 was the second most important cave of the total 11 caves found at Qumran. Cave 11 was also the most controversial cave. This is where the famous temple scroll was found. What you see out there due east are the modern-day hills of Jordan. That body of water in front of that, well, that's obviously the Dead Sea. And in front of that is the Judean desert. And on this first ridge line, and down here in the shadows a few inches, well, this is where you'll find cave number 4. It being the most important cave of, again, those total 11 caves found at Qumran. Now, 15,000 of the 19,000 pieces that make up this great discovery were found on the floor of Cave 4 alone. Now, as you get up close, I encourage you to take a close look inside of Cave 4. For what you'll notice here are these little grooves or holes on the inside and the outside of the cave walls. Now, there's a couple dozen of these little grooves or holes in all. These are nothing more than modern-day bookshelf holders. If you can imagine for a few moments the equivalent of 2x4s, maybe something just a bit wider, stretching across from one set of grooves you'll find here on this side of the cave to its matching set of grooves over on the other side of the cave. There is your modern-day bookshelf. Well, pottery will go on top of the shelves, scrolls will go inside of the pottery, and in some cases that pottery actually labeled. Now you have your own modern-day mini-library. Well, in roughly 70 A.D., what many military strategists will tell you was the most awesome fighting force the world has ever known will lay siege to the northwestern corner of the Dead Sea and that famous Qumran community. They went by the name the 10th Roman Legion. And under General Titus's control, very same future Emperor of Rome Titus's control, they'll absolutely level Qumran. General Titus will order his men to enter into the caves, and with their swords drawn, they'll just begin swinging wildly, without much care or concern for what it was that they were destroying. Now, that they don't destroy, 1,800 years of earthquakes will shake this region that you see here in front of you. Once again, helping create this 19,000-piece jigsaw puzzle that scholarship has spent the better part of 55 years reassembling those 800 scrolls with that we actually know today. Now, to help understand this reconstruction problem a bit better, think about things this way. On your way back homes today, stop at a little Quick Mart. Go inside and pick up 3 bags of potato chips. Get a bag of Ruffles, get a bag of Lay's, get a tube of Pringles. Now, when you get back to your kitchens, scrunch all those potato chips up, then mix them all together in a bowl. Shake the bowl up, throw the bowl up in the air, then let the chips fall where they may. Now sweep up all the chips, put them back on your kitchen table. Now spend the rest of the day reassembling each and every one of those potato chips back to its proper form. Then make sure each potato chip gets put back into its right brand bag. Multiply that problem by close to 200 times. Now you know exactly what scholarship's been faced with. Here's how things looked in 1953. Here's how things looked in 1963. A little bit more intelligent. Here's one of my academic heroes here. He goes by the name Dr. John Strugnell, one of the great Dead Sea Scroll scholars, also spent quite a few years at Harvard University. Now, what you see there in front of him is what we know as one of the Leviticus scrolls that were uncovered in the caves of Qumran, but you'll see a couple of things on this photo worth noting. First, you'll see